Well, good morning and welcome to the Ideal Factor. My name is Mark Hunsker and I'm part of the Ideal Implant sales team. And I am fortunate to be here in the beautiful Pacific Northwest in downtown Seattle with a surgeon who I've known for quite some time since he's been in Seattle. And it's somebody that I have the utmost respect for, both as a surgeon and as a person. He's just a quality individual, and so I feel honored to have him here today. Dr. Shahram Salami, whose practice is in downtown Seattle and is one of the premier plastic surgery practices in all of the Northwest. So, good morning, Dr. Salami, and good to see you.
Good morning, Mark. How are you?
I'm doing well. So I want to get into your practice, but I want to start this out because you got a cool story. So you grew up in Austin, Texas. You went to Yale for your undergrad. You studied molecular biophysics and biochemistry, and you were captain of the Yale soccer team. What was that like?
Well, it all sounds more impressive than it actually was. I mean, it was a lot of hard work. I loved soccer growing up, and I played it my whole life, so it was kind of my dream to play in college, and it was my dream to go to a really good school, and it kind of worked out for me that they thought I was good enough to play for them and good enough to, or I guess smart enough to get through 4 years at Yale. So I was honored to be accepted there. And then, I just kind of worked my way up the ranks. And Yale has a really cool system actually for all the sports, not to get too much in the weeds in it. But back when I was there, all the sports had one captain only, and it had to be a senior, and they were voted in by their teammates.
Oh, wow.
So it was kind of a cool experience. It wasn't the coach picking the captain, it was the teammate. So it was a really big honor for me, and I enjoyed it. It was one of the highlights of my soccer playing career for sure.
So you're not only talented, but you're also well-liked. That's excellent by your teammates. That's good.
I was flattered, I have to say. It was really cool.
Well, that's a great story. Mm-hmm. So you're at Yale, you're playing soccer, you're doing well in school. Is medical school the goal right out of the gate? Did you know that when you went to Yale?
Yeah. I knew I wanted to be a doctor, and I was pretty sure I wanted to be a surgeon. I always enjoyed kind of working with my hands and building things, and I thought that would be kind of a fun way of being a doc. I didn't know where I was going to go to med school or, what type of surgeon I wanted to be, but that was definitely the goal from the beginning.
Okay, great. So you finished undergrad, and then med school is next, and you go to med school at Yale. You stay at Yale.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it was great. It was really great experience there. And just an awesome medical school, kind of prepares you for, whatever type of medicine you want to practice in the future. So we spent 4 years there, and I really loved it.
And so during that time, plastic surgery kind of starts to hit the radar?
Well, it was on the radar, but it was interesting. I knew I wanted to be a surgeon, and for a while I wanted to do cardiac surgery, and then for a while I wanted to do pediatric surgery. I wasn't quite sure which one, and I really actually made that decision once I came to the University of Washington, when I came here for surgical training, and that's when it kind of all came together for plastic surgery.
Okay. How did the University of Washington come into play?
Well, interestingly, I was looking for a really strong program, and one of the things that the UW has that a few of the sort of the elite programs in the country have is they have a system where there's a university hospital that offers sort of high-level intricate care. They have a trauma center that offers really, really difficult, challenging cases of patients who are really severely ill and sick. There's a children's hospital that's separate, and there's a veterans hospital. So you have these 4 different places where you see everything you can possibly see in medicine. And that's what I was really looking for. And there was a handful of programs in the country that had that. And when I came out to Seattle for the interview, I said, this is it. I want to live here. I saw Mount Rainier in the morning on a sunrise, and I was like, wow, I had never been here. And I just said, this is where I want to live.
Wow. That's great. So you got a wide array of experiences at the University of Washington, and I'm sure you have some great stories to tell from that.
Yeah, you could write a book. It's pretty fun.
So, and then you go on to start a practice or join a practice in Washington, D.C., right?
Yeah. So what happened when I was here in Seattle is I actually met my now wife when she was finishing up her medical school training, and then she was going to go out to Washington, D.C. for her residency. So I said, yeah, I'll go back east with you. And we spent 4 years there while she was doing her training. She's actually a phenomenal OBGYN and frankly a better surgeon than I am, but I try not to tell her too much, get her ego too inflated. But she is a really good surgeon. And so we were there, and I learned so much in my time in D.C. I was part of a really, I was fortunate enough to be hired by a surgeon there who had been in practice for actually longer than I'd been alive. That's the kind of experience I got from him. And I learned everything or a lot about aesthetic surgery from him. So it was a really great experience. And then we both wanted to come back to Seattle. My wife's from Seattle, and that's where we came back to settle.
Fantastic. So this is when I met you, when you came back here and you joined a practice in Seattle.
Yep.
And you came out of the gate very quickly and got busy and developed a name for yourself. And then you started your own practice, and that was quite a process because you essentially built out your own practice and your own surgery center, which is not an easy task. Can we talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So after a few years of being in a group practice, I felt like I was ready to build something on my own. And I always wanted to have my own operating room, primarily because it gives myself and my patients a lot more flexibility and freedom. We're not relying on a ambulatory surgery center or a hospital to give us access to the operating room. Mm-hmm. And that's really important. We can also tailor our schedule to what works best for our patients. We've had occasion where we've had to, operate late, operate early, even operate on a weekend, whatever it really took to take care of patients we've been able to do. And that also helps, honestly, just with my family life, because I'm super dedicated to my kids and my wife. So being able to have flexibility to, take vacations or go to soccer games or whatever it is I'm doing, that allowed that to happen. And that took a lot of time. It was a very stressful time in my life, but I'm glad we did it, and it's been great. It's been actually just about 10 years now since we built it out.
Wow.
Yeah.
The time goes by quickly.
Yeah.
You talk about your family, and I know you're a very dedicated father and husband. You have 3 young girls at home.
I do.
That's exciting.
It is. I think any father of daughters knows it's exciting and terrifying at the same time.
Yeah. Well, God bless you, is all I can say.
Well, they're pretty great.
They're wonderful girls.
They
absolutely
are. They are.
Yes,
they keep me on my toes.
Yes, they are. So let's talk a little bit about your practice now.
Yeah.
And, obviously we're going to talk a little bit about breast augmentation and kind of what your process is in, let's talk a little bit about your consultation and how you kind of go through that with a patient.
Yeah. I think that the consultation really starts from the initial phone call and introduction to our practice. We really want folks to feel like we're trying to make the process as easy for them as we can. Mm-hmm. People travel sometimes from far and wide to come and see us, and we try to make it an easy process. We want folks to feel welcomed and comfortable. We typically will start by really getting a sense of who they are, not just their medical history and that kind of thing, but also what their goals are. And what's interesting is that as a surgeon, when you stop and just listen and not talk over a patient, what you find is that oftentimes their goals are not really what you thought their goals are going to be. And that's a really important skill to have, and it takes time to develop that. So what I try to do is figure out what it is that they want, listen to them carefully, and then see if we can offer that to them and have a really honest conversation about goals, expectations. Is what they want realistic? Can we meet that goal? Can we exceed that goal? And then try to figure out a way to take care of them in a manner that fits their life. And that takes a lot of time. That's more important in many ways than, the nuts and bolts of the exam or the history. Those things are important, but first and foremost, we want to figure out who they are and what they want.
Sure. Well, that's important because I'm sure it's easy to project kind of what your thoughts on to what the patient, what you think the patient needs or wants.
Yeah, there's many stories of bad experiences that patients have had in other practices where the surgeon just sort of took over and said, "This is what I'm doing," and that's, I think it's awfully paternalistic and certainly not the way we run a practice, but I don't think society in general is like that anymore either. We have to be more collaborative.
Yeah, without a doubt. If you look at, say, the three main procedures that you do in your practice, what would those be?
Yeah, so the three operations I do the most are some type of breast augmentation, and that can be a primary augmentation where someone's never had any surgery. It could be also a revision augmentation. So we do see a lot of patients who've had surgeries elsewhere that want us to do something to make it better. And I think that happens to a lot of surgeons as we get more and more experienced. We tend to see the more complicated cases coming to us.
Sure.
I do a lot of tummy tucks. That's also a big operation we do. And then probably the third one is kind of the combination of those two, which we call a mommy makeover, where we're doing a tummy tuck, some type of breast operation, maybe some liposuction, kind of combining all of those together. Sure. And that's takes a whole other skill set because you have to be able to marry those operations together, create a very balanced result, and also know when you need to divide those operations and do them separately for the safety and the well-being of the patient. So a lot of it is judgment and experience. But yeah, those are kind of the most common operations I do.
So looking at breast augmentation or breast implants in particular, when a patient comes in, do you find that there are specific questions or concerns that the majority of patients, they kind of have the same, I don't know if it would be apprehensions or, just the same questions that they ask you?
Yeah. So most patients will ask about kind of the basics. So how long does the procedure take? How long do I have to take off from work? When can I start working out again? Do I need help with my kids? Am I a good candidate for the operation? Those are the sort of the basics that they want to know about. And then we also get into sort of not just like, for example, with breast implants, it's not just about what size are you, what size do you want to be, not that, but what look do you want? That's important. What's the durability of the implants? How long do they last? When do I have to have a revision? Those sort of things people really want to know because it's interesting. They do tend to plan out not just what I want now, but what is this going to be like in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? That's really what they want to know. So there's a lot of sort of similar questions. And then when you really kind of get into the nitty gritty, sometimes there's more specific things that are unique to each patient.
Sure. So there are a lot of, different options, different implants on the market. There are silicone implants, there's saline implants. There's the ideal implant, which is a kind of a hybrid of the two. Do you, when you discuss implants, do you kind of go through the pros and cons of every implant? And and the other question is, do patients ever come in and ask you specifically for a brand of implant?
Yeah, so those are great questions. So yes, when we see a patient, we want to give them the best and the most amount of information. Now, what's interesting about patients today is that more often than not, they come in having done a lot of research on their own. They often know as much or more about the implant than, some doctors that are like a family doc that's referring them. They'll know that I know I want this type or that type. But what we talk about is there are saline implants, there's silicone implants. We talk about the different types of saline implants. We talk about the different surfaces of implants. We talk about the different profiles and shapes of implants. And then I think what's really helpful is we actually have them available for them to look at. So they can say, how does this feel? How does that look? And we go through the pros and cons of each because the truth of the matter is, just like with any surgery, any device has pros and cons as well. And they need to be aware of that. And in the end, it's really up to them. There'll be patients that'll certainly ask for our opinion and say, what do you think based on your experience? What would you recommend? And we will give them a recommendation, of course. But ultimately, if they say, I only want this type of implant, we're happy to do it. And we talk to them about if there are any drawbacks so that they're aware of that. But yeah, we go through all that. And then in terms of patients coming in with their own idea, yeah, so there are definitely patients who come in and will ask for a specific implant by name. And we definitely will, honor that. If they want to have a specific implant, we'll do it.
Okay. So at what point in your career, well, I know the answer to this question, but you can, for the audience, when were you introduced to the Ideal implant?
I think it's been a couple, 2-3 years now. Yeah. And I know they've gone through some changes and there's now the new version now that's been really great. I like the idea of that as an option for patients. I think in the end, what we as surgeons want, we want choices. We want patients to be able to say, I want this for this reason, or I want this one for that reason. And I really liked it as a choice. It's certainly, and in my mind, it's certainly a lovely option for folks. Patients who come and ask me for it, they really like the idea of knowing if there's a rupture. That's kind of the number one thing I hear from them. They say, I want to know. I don't want to have imaging. I don't have to worry about it. And what I tell patients is if that is your number one goal, this is a really, really good option. And frankly, I think it's superior to a traditional saline implant by leaps and bounds. So we like having that as a choice for our patients. And the patients that we've had who have chosen that implant, they love it. They've been super happy, and it's been a great option for them.
That's fantastic. Do you think so? When you're in a consult and you're going through the differences in the implants, do you think that patients understand the differences between like a structured saline implant like the Ideal implant and a traditional saline implant?
Oh, yeah. So I think, first of all, if you just show them the two, it's obvious that one has structure and one doesn't. Yeah. And then we explain to them, what the structure is and what is it that's making it look the way it does. It's about as obvious as it gets when you just look at the two. And I would encourage patients to actually just ask their docs to show them the implant so they can see.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it's great for patients to be able to see it on the table and see what's going into their body. So I'm going to back up a second. You had mentioned, patients are concerned with the longevity of the device and what's it going to look like in 5 years, 10 years. How do you address that, or how do you put those, I guess, concerns to rest?
Yeah, so what I tell patients is that any device inside their body carries with it the potential of needing some type of surgery again down the road. Realistically, there's no way to tell a patient that you're going to have one operation and you're never going to need one ever again. I think the important thing is for them to understand if they do, what that would involve, how do they know if they need something done, and then to maintain communication with them. So we typically like to see folks every year just for a quick check, just to make sure everything looks good, feels good, et cetera. But we also have our doors open if there's a question they have, even if it's been 5 years, 10 years later, and they're not sure about something, to come on in and we can take a look at it. But I think in the end, they have to know what the pros and cons are with each option and how we would address it.
Okay. That is great. I wanted to go back to something personal. I'm kind of jumping around here, but you've got a lot of interesting things that you've done in your life, and for a while there, you were really into kind of extreme racing. Like you did some pretty amazing stuff. Talk a little bit about that, and what was the motivation? Clearly, you're a very self-disciplined, motivated person. Where do you find that? You're running a practice, you've got 3 kids at home, and all of a sudden you're training for these, really impressive races.
Oh, well, that's, So I got into these extreme races actually through a friend of mine, and it's, we kind of became junkies and started to do more and more extreme races. And I'm actually still doing them. I just finished, in June, we were in Italy doing there's a race in the Dolomites called the Lavaredo Ultra Trail. And it sounds very impressive, except when you realize that there's multiple distances, and I was one of the shorter distances. It was about 50 kilometers, but the big distance is 120 kilometers. I didn't try that. What I like about the race is that it is difficult. You have to really push yourself. You have to plan. It takes months to train. But the payoff at the end is you get to see these little corners of the world that you really can't get to in any other way other than by foot.
Wow.
And the memories and the photographs we have from it are spectacular. The one I did a couple of years ago was called the Ultra Trail de Mont Blanc in France, and that was really amazing. So I have a couple of other ideas. I think we're going to try to go to Spain and do one this summer in Spain to kind of round out our little European tour. And my wife loves it because then we all, we make a big family trip out of it, and the kids get to see these little pockets of the world. And,
yeah.
And that's sort of the trade-off. She told me, if you're going to train this much for these races, they better be in cool places, and we better all go. And so I'm doing them in places that I think she'd like to see. So they've been great. It's been a lot of fun.
Well, that's great. And, clearly you're an underachiever. So,
yeah.
Well, do you have any closing thoughts, anything that you'd like to talk about, as it relates to your practice, as it relates to breast implants, I'll just leave it open for you.
Yeah, what I would say, I think one of the purposes of this podcast is to help better inform patients. The thing that I try to tell patients as often as I can is when it comes to plastic surgeons in pretty much any corner of the United States, you're going to have a lot of good choices. And I think in Seattle we have tons of really good choices for really great plastic surgeons. I encourage folks to make sure to do their homework and go to a board certified plastic surgeon. That is a really, really important thing for me. And when patients come to see me, I'm more than happy to give them names of surgeons in town that I know and trust, and I would send my family to, that are outstanding. I think that is the best thing you can do to protect yourself and to make sure you're getting good care, and also that they're going to be with you in case something doesn't go right.
Yeah.
That, if I could give sort of one public service announcement, that would be the thing. Find a good board-certified plastic surgeon. And that is different than someone who claims to be certified by the American Board of Cosmetic Surgery. That is not an accredited board. So be really careful about that. And there's a lot of good websites and online information to help you with that. In our office, we'd be happy to help with that too.
Yeah, well, that's a really good point because patients don't always know, and they see a certification, but it's not a board certification for plastic surgery, and that's important to educate your patients. So, well, it's been a pleasure to have you here. I mean, it's always great to see you, and it's fun talking about some of the personal stuff, and then hearing about your practice and the journey to where you're at now.
Cool.
So,
thanks, Mark.
Thank you for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.